Hello again. So this is the second episode in my development diary featuring the game Fragile Existence, a kind of space strategy survival roguelike with 4X elements. Now, so this sort of what I'm showing you now is what I've been working on for the past week or two. And as we see, there is the planet Jupiter. It has an 8K texture, which I just found online. And the shader is something that I've been working on myself. I'm not very familiar with the shader graph, but sort of slowly getting the hang of it. And you see that sort of nice lighting effect around the outside of the planet. And the actual lit side is slightly more emissive. I think it looks pretty good. I mean, a gas giant doesn't necessarily need a sort of atmospheric scattering layer, but it's something that I thought I should probably work on to see whether it looks any good. So of course you can get moons, and we can get any sort of planet type we could need. But at the moment I'm just using textures. Eventually there will be some sort of procedural generation, and you'll be able to actually go down to the planet surfaces as well. It's pretty tricky with an 8K texture. As you can see, it sort of breaks up a little bit when you zoom in really close. Now, it's not particularly interactable. It does look good, but it's probably not going to be fit for purpose once we start actually wanting to do things on the surface as well. You'll note that I've kind of changed things up a little bit from my previous video where I've got rid of the skybox. It's just a black background now. And I don't have any lights on the far side of the planet opposite the sun, so it's completely black. And whilst I think it looks pretty good, I think there is a problem in game terms. I'm not really going to be able to see anything that's on this side unless they've got running lights, or whether they have some sort of emissive texture so you could see like the lights from the ships, the inside. Coming out of windows kind of thing. That could look pretty good, but I think pitch black is probably not a good idea in game terms. So this is sort of an attempt to see what it would look like if we do it really realistically, but in terms of the game, I think really realistic is not quite the way to go. So some sort of happy medium where I introduce some lights on the far side without it looking too bright and still having the nice shader effect. So you see I'm moving around the planet here using probably one of the first things I developed, which was the camera system. And that's basically achieved with a Cinemachine module, which I believe implements the Freeview camera, or rather a series of Freeview cameras. But with each zoom that we do here, what we're doing is moving to a different sort of rig setup. And I've got it with limits at the top and bottom so that we don't ever get lost in terms of our orientation. And I changed the field of view a little bit as we zoom in as well, because otherwise it can look a little bit distorted. And I think it gives a good sort of sense of scale. It kind of makes things look pretty big. And there's no reason the planets can't be bigger than they are. We're just at the prototype stage of the planets, and well, it looks pretty good, I think. Anyway, what I've also been working on is sort of implementing prefabs for the hauler and the liner, which are the first two ships I've been working on. You'll notice that they are lacking in textures, and I've pretty much just made these models in like 30 minutes in Blender, and I can put a few down. And you can select each individual one, and you get a little blue outline, and the blue outline is even visible when the ship is on the other side of the planet, so you don't lose it. And you can select each one, and the UI is actually updating here as I click on each individual object. You just can't tell because they are the same object. So if we put down a liner model as well, you'll see the name of the ship comes down, comes up over here. You get a little picture, and you also get some other UI components, which I'll sort of go into. So down here we have the power core. Ideally it would be animated, but I'm not going to do that right now, because I know that animated UI components can be a bit processor hungry. So for now it's just a static interface. This power bar here represents the maximum power that your ship, that particular ship, can have, and you'll notice I've just used the same power source for each of them. And the actual current power that the ship is putting out is represented by this blue bar. And then the components, in which there are 3 here, are the components that this ship currently has, or at least the ones that I've currently designed. And the symbols are just placeholders, but generally this is the bridge, this is the like the engine system, propulsion, and this is the computer system, which you need in order to do multiple waypoints. And in fact, if the bridge isn't functioning, you can't even select the ship properly, so, or it doesn't give any like status information about the ship from afar. And obviously, if the propulsion isn't working, then you can't move the ship. So what you can actually do here is you can drag and drop each of these components depending on the order that you want that component to be powered. So if it's towards the power core, right on the left hand side, this item is now the component of the ship that will remain powered even when this bar starts to come down. So if this bar starts moving to the left, the propulsion system would be depowered, and then eventually the computer system, but the bridge, like I say, the symbols probably need to be changed, they're not entirely clear, but the computer would remain powered. And it's not necessarily a sensible choice there, but you get the idea. So the power doesn't actually change at the moment, that's sort of this week's work, but you can move these around. The way this is implemented is a pooling system. So it's got another layout group that's hidden, and it's just taking the actual components from that as it needs to. And currently it's not saving the positions to the actual each individual item, but that's easy to do and something I'm working on next week. What I've also been working on is some basic particle systems. So when you click to move, the ship will have a little thing, which is what the computer system does, and then the thrusters will kick in. And the thrusters are only there when it's accelerating, and they are there to rotate the actual ship in place. And the max acceleration is a specific value that each ship can have. The cargo ship rotates at a slightly different rate. But the idea is that these are big, bulky capital ships. These aren't fighters. These aren't particularly swift ships. So they take quite a bit of time to rotate. We're going into the dark side now, so you won't be able to see much. But the thrusters kick on again when it needs to slow down, and then the main engine kicks in, which is like a sort of ion energy sort of thing. And you see they're both using the same particle system at the moment. I think it looks kind of cool. It's better than my first attempt at a particle effect. This actually uses a trail renderer, which grows over time, and a particle effect that's triggered when it starts moving. And I can actually place as many ships as I need to right now. This is all prefabs, so the rendering system happily puts them into batches. We can only select each individual ship. That's sort of by design. It was never intended to be a game where you build massive amounts of units and just sort of throw them at the enemy. It's a far more strategic type of game. You can see these units, they turn quite slowly. These are not the swiftest of ships. But again, the little thrusters should be kicking in when it needs to decelerate. Then the main drive kicks in and it's off. So I think the blue is quite a good contrast to the darkness of the planet. And there seems no problem with generating thousands of ships right now. Not an issue at all. No real frame rate notice difference. But we do not actually have collision in place yet. So the units are actually moving through each other. And that's something I'll be working on this week as well. What I'm intending to do is that the ships will actually send out a ray in front of them, and they'll move up and down relative to the center of the planet in order to dodge out of the way. Unless, of course, you intend to ram a ship, which is, of course, something you'll be able to do eventually. So those are the main things that I've been working on lately. Obviously, at some point, we'll be expanding from one planet to multiple planets in the system, and the ships will be able to move away from the orbit layer and actually travel between the planets. I should probably add some textures to these ships at some point. Anyway, thanks for watching. That's been episode 2 of the development diary, and I'll be back next week to let you know how things are going.